The cell stank of rust and old blood, a sour tang that clung to every breath Marcus Hale took. His ribs ached with every inhale, the bruises across his back tightening whenever he shifted against the cold wall. Pain had long ago become his companion, a constant presence that reminded him he was still alive, though barely. The war had stripped him of everything except that stubborn heartbeat, and he guarded it out of spite more than hope. Around him, the other prisoners muttered quietly. Some nursed wounds, some stared at the floor with hollow eyes, and others tried to pretend they were still soldiers by keeping their backs straight. Marcus could see the truth in all of them. Men broken, not by battle but by captivity. His gaze landed briefly on Sergeant Kellen, slouched in the corner with a split lip, who returned the glance with a smirk that held no humor. "You look worse than the walls," Kellen rasped. Marcus didn't answer. The guards made their presence known with the hiss of the sliding door. Two of them entered, towering reptilian figures clad in jagged armor plates that reflected the dim light. The XYRTH carried the smell of iron and smoke wherever they went, like the aftermath of a battlefield pressed into flesh. Varric led them, a broad-shouldered brute whose eyes glimmered with cruel anticipation. He spoke in clipped tones of his language, words sharp as blades, and shoved a smaller figure into the room. Marcus narrowed his eyes. It was the boy again. Kale, the alien child, stood awkwardly in the center of the cell, his oversized tunic torn and dust-stained. His eyes, wider and more luminous than those of his kin, darted around nervously, fixing at last on Marcus. Kale's frailty was an oddity among the reptilian species. His limbs seemed too thin, his stance unsteady, his gaze soft where others were predatory. Marcus couldn't understand why the boy was kept here among soldiers and prisoners. It was as though the XYRTH had dragged a fragile ember into a pit of smoldering coals. Varric barked a laugh and pushed Kale hard in the chest. The child stumbled, tripped over his own feet, and collapsed on the floor. The guards chuckled, a low rumble that reverberated through the walls. "Weak spawn." One of them spat in halting human speech, his words mangled but clear enough. Marcus felt Kellen's eyes on him, a warning glance that said, "Don't move." But Marcus's fists clenched anyway. Varric grabbed Kale by the scruff of his tunic and lifted him easily, dangling the boy like a doll. He raised his other hand, claws catching the light. The prisoners turned away, unwilling to watch another display of cruelty. Marcus did not. His jaw tightened, heat rising through his chest despite the ache of his broken ribs. Something inside him refused to allow this, refused to let the smallest and weakest suffer under the weight of monsters. "Enough," Marcus growled, his voice low, roughened by disuse. The sound silenced the chamber. Varric turned his head slowly, lips curling back to reveal serrated teeth. "Human speaks," he sneered. "Human forgets place." Marcus pushed himself to his feet. Every muscle protested, but he ignored the pain. "He's just a child." The alien laughed, a guttural sound that scraped like stones. "Child of XYRTH. Enemy's blood. Not yours to guard." Marcus stepped forward anyway. His body screamed with each movement, but he squared his shoulders and planted himself between Kale and the warden. "Then hit me instead." The silence that followed was heavy, almost sacred. Even the other prisoners lifted their heads, disbelief written across their faces. For a human captive to speak back was foolish. To invite punishment was madness. Varric did not hesitate. His clawed hand shot forward, striking Marcus across the face. The impact spun him sideways, copper flooding his mouth. He staggered, wiped blood from his lip, and straightened again. The alien struck him again, harder this time, sending him crashing into the wall. Marcus dragged himself upright. The beating continued. Blow after blow, Varric unleashed his strength, each strike punctuated by snarls of contempt. Marcus's vision blurred, his knees buckled, but he refused to fall for long. Every time the alien knocked him down, he clawed his way back up, not for pride, not for defiance alone, but because the boy stood behind him, wide-eyed and trembling. He had chosen, and once chosen, there was no retreat. The other prisoners watched in silence. Some winced, others clenched their fists, but none dared intervene. The sound of fists against flesh echoed through the chamber until at last, with a snarl of frustration, Varric shoved Marcus aside. The human collapsed onto his hands and knees, coughing blood onto the floor. Pathetic, the alien spat. He shoved Cale toward the corner, scowled at Marcus's crumpled form, and left the cell with his guards, muttering curses under his breath. The door slammed shut, leaving only the ragged breathing of men who had seen too much. Kellen muttered, "You're out of your damned mind, Hale." He shook his head and turned away, though Marcus thought he caught the faintest flicker of respect in the man's eyes. Marcus lay on his side, chest heaving, every nerve screaming with pain. He wondered why he had done it. Why, after years of being beaten himself, he had chosen to bear another's punishment. His vision dimmed at the edges, the cold floor beneath him spreading like a shadow. And then he felt it, a small, hesitant touch against his bruised hand. He forced his eyes open and found Cale crouched beside him. The boy's luminous gaze shimmered with something Marcus had not expected, gratitude, perhaps even reverence. The alien child whispered in broken human words, his voice soft but certain. "Mother will know." Marcus's breath caught. The boy's words lodged deep in his mind, more haunting than any pain. He did not yet understand their meaning, but he knew one thing. He had changed something in that moment, altered the currents of his fate. The cell seemed darker, quieter. The other men avoided his eyes. And Marcus lay still, Cale's fragile hand resting against his own, knowing with a soldier's instinct that his world had just shifted into dangerous, uncharted territory. Marcus woke with his chest a furnace of pain. Each shallow breath cut like glass, and the ache in his ribs made even the act of turning his head feel monumental. The prison's dim light had shifted from its sickly orange hue to something closer to gray. Hours must have passed. He blinked, and the haze cleared enough to see Kellen sitting nearby, staring at him with a mixture of irritation and begrudging respect. "You're either the bravest fool I've met or the stupidest," Kellen muttered, tossing him a strip of cloth scavenged from an old tunic. "Wipe your face. Looks like someone painted it with rust." Marcus pressed the rag to his lip, tasting dried blood. His body felt hollow, but he forced himself upright, propping his back against the wall. "Better me than the kid," he rasped. Kellen's laugh was humorless. "He's not your kid, Hale. He's theirs. Don't forget that." The boy was gone, taken when the guards left, but the weight of his hand on Marcus's still lingered in memory. He had spoken of his mother, words laced with a certainty that unsettled Marcus more than the beating itself. Later, when the guards brought the stale rations, Cale returned. He lingered in the doorway before darting forward, setting a small bowl in Marcus's lap as though it were some sacred offering. His wide eyes searched Marcus's battered face, unflinching even at the bruises. The other prisoners stared, unease thickening the air. "What do you want from me?" Marcus asked quietly. Cale tilted his head, as though the words were puzzle pieces he struggled to fit. He tapped his own chest, then Marcus's. "Bond," he said carefully in the human tongue, each syllable weighted with unfamiliar gravity. Before Marcus could question him, Yora's gravelly voice broke in from the corner. The older prisoner, white-bearded and thin as a wire, leaned forward. "Careful, Hale. Words like that mean more in their culture than you realize." Marcus frowned. "You understand him?" "Bits and pieces," Yora admitted. "I've listened long enough to know when they speak of their matriarch. Everything revolves around her. That boy's no ordinary child, he's blood of the throne." Protecting him, he trailed off, his expression grave. "It binds you, whether you meant it or not." Cale nodded as though confirming the old man's words. His small hand gripped Marcus's wrist firmly, a gesture almost ritualistic. "Mother knows," he repeated, his voice steady now. The chamber grew tense. Even the younger soldiers who had once mocked Marcus now avoided his gaze, as if afraid proximity alone might draw the attention of forces beyond their comprehension. Hours passed before the guards returned, and this time they came not with cruelty, but with a wary silence. Varric no longer sneered when he looked at Marcus. His glare still burned with hatred, yet beneath it was something else, restraint, perhaps even fear. Commander Drayle arrived shortly after, his presence heavy as storm clouds. Unlike the guards, Drayle carried himself with disciplined authority, his posture rigid, his scales burnished to a sheen. His gaze swept over the prisoners before settling on Marcus. "Human," Drayle said in accented common, his voice cold and deliberate. "Your defiance travels faster than chains can hold it." The matriarch hears whispers of a man who would bleed for her son. Marcus stiffened. The boy's lineage was no rumor now. It was truth delivered from the lips of their commander. "I didn't do it for her," Marcus replied hoarsely. "I did it because he's a child." Drayle's eyes narrowed. Intent is irrelevant. Action binds more deeply than words. You stepped into the circle of her blood, and now you cannot step out. He turned sharply and addressed the guards in his native tongue. They stiffened at his command, their tails lashing uneasily. Before leaving, Drayle spoke again, low enough that only Marcus and Yora could hear. "Pray the matriarch forgets you, human. If she does not, your chains will grow heavier than iron." The warning lingered long after he left. That night, the silence among the prisoners was suffocating. Some whispered that Marcus had doomed them all, drawing the gaze of the most powerful being in the alien empire. Others murmured that perhaps he had won a weapon stronger than escape, a bond with the heir himself. Marcus ignored both sides. His body burned too fiercely with pain, and his thoughts tangled like barbed wire. When sleep finally dragged him under, he dreamed of firelight and shadowed figures, of a colossal presence that spoke in a voice both terrible and enthralling. He woke with a start, sweat cold against his skin, Kale curled beside him as though he belonged there. The following day, commotion erupted beyond the cell walls. The sound of boots striking metal floors, orders barked in guttural tones, the hum of engines. Kellen pressed an ear to the door, his brow furrowed. Something's happening. He was right. The door hissed open, and this time a squad of armored soldiers entered, their formation precise, their weapons gleaming. Unlike the ordinary guards, these moved with ritual discipline. At their head stood a figure taller and more ornate than any Marcus had yet seen. His armor was etched with flowing sigils, his helm crowned with jagged ridges. "The human called Marcus Hale," the soldier announced, his voice resonant and formal. "By decree of the matriarch, you are summoned." The words struck the cell like a hammer blow. Kellen swore under his breath. Yura closed his eyes in grim resignation, and the younger prisoners shrank back against the walls. Marcus forced himself to his feet, every bone protesting. "And if I refuse?" The soldier's expression did not waver. "There is no refusal. The matriarch does not ask. She commands." Kale darted forward, his small hand latching onto Marcus's again, eyes shining with a strange mix of relief and urgency. "Mother waits," he whispered. The guards seized Marcus by the arms, but he barely felt their grip. His pulse thundered in his ears, not from fear alone but from the crushing weight of inevitability. The choice he thought had been his was nothing of the sort. By saving the boy, he had stepped into a current far stronger than himself. As they dragged him from the cell, Marcus caught one last look at the men he was leaving behind. Kellen stared after him, lips pressed into a tight line, while Yura simply gave a slow nod, as though acknowledging the shape of destiny unfolding. The corridor outside stretched long and cold, lit by veins of harsh white light. The footsteps of the guards echoed, carrying Marcus toward a fate he could neither fight nor flee. Behind him, the cell door sealed with a final hiss. Ahead of him waited the matriarch. "Would you like me to dive straight into Section 3, 1,000 words, next, showing Marcus's first encounter with the alien capital and his growing legend, or would you prefer I pause here and generate an image prompt for Section 2 first?" You said. At the far end, a dais of obsidian rose in tiers. Upon it hung a vast veil, woven from strands of something that shimmered like molten silver, obscuring what lay beyond. Marcus's eyes lingered on it, unease curling in his gut. He could feel a presence there, immense and patient, as though the air itself bent around it. Razek spoke again. Before you stand the assembled council, voices of our people. They wish to see if the human who bled for the matriarch's heir is truly worthy of her gaze. A ripple moved through the chamber as one of the counselors, armored in crimson, stepped forward. Test him, the alien declared, his voice like stone grinding. 2 warriors advanced, their steps thunderous. They halted before Marcus, then unsheathed curved blades that glowed faintly with heat. Marcus's shackles were removed with a hiss of releasing metal, and the guard stepped back. Razek inclined his head. You may defend yourself, human.
Or you may kneel.
One choice shows strength, the other shows wisdom. Either will reveal what you are. Marcus flexed his raw wrists, rolling his shoulders despite the pain screaming through his body. He looked from the blades to the crowd, then back to his would-be opponents. I've already done my kneeling, he said. The clash was brutal. The warriors struck with precision, each blow heavy enough to rattle his bones. Marcus dodged where he could, countered where he must, his fists finding cracks in their armor, his instincts carrying him when his body faltered. He bled quickly, cuts opening across his arms and face, but he refused to yield. At last, he caught one warrior's wrist, twisted, and wrenched the blade free. With a roar, he planted the weapon into the ground rather than his foe. The chamber was silent. Marcus stood, chest heaving, blood dripping, weapon discarded at his feet. I don't kill because you tell me to, he growled. I fight for what matters. And if you can't understand that, then maybe you should be the ones kneeling. The words echoed like thunder. For a moment, no one moved. Then Kale's voice rang out, high and certain. The boy had slipped from the shadows at the edge of the dais, eyes burning with conviction. He is mine to protect, as he protected me. Gasps rippled through the assembly. To claim such a bond in public was audacious, even for the matriarch's heir. The counselors exchanged uneasy glances, and Razek's expression sharpened, though whether in disapproval or admiration Marcus could not tell. Then the veil stirred. A sound like a breath of wind swept the chamber, though no air moved. A voice followed, deep and resonant, each syllable carrying weight enough to settle into Marcus's bones. Human, it said. The word was rich, commanding, undeniable. You bled for my blood. You defied my warriors. You stand unbroken where others would crawl. Now you are mine. The veil shimmered, the silhouette of a vast figure moving behind it. Marcus felt every gaze in the chamber burn into him, but he did not bow. His fists clenched, his jaw set, his heart thundered with rage and fear intertwined. He had stepped into the jaws of something far larger than himself, and for the first time since his capture, Marcus realized his defiance had become something else entirely, a legend in the making, one that even an empire could not ignore. Would you like me to carry this momentum into Section 4, 1050 words, right away, closing the story with Marcus's final choice and the HFY climax? You said. Construct Section 4 with a clear, focused narrative that introduces the main characters and central conflict. Use a diverse vocabulary and ensure each sentence contributes to advancing the plot or deepening character understanding. Ensure top-notch character development. Limit the section to 1,000 words and avoid introducing any elements that do not serve the story's immediate needs. Structure the section to have a satisfying and thrilling end and great climax. There should be no headings. ChatGPT said. The chamber emptied slowly after the matriarch's decree, leaving Marcus standing alone under the watch of a few silent guards. His body ached with every heartbeat, his blood drying in dark streaks across his skin, but his mind refused to bend as his body had. He replayed her words again and again. You are mine. To the XYRDH, it had been a proclamation of triumph, yet to him it was a chain heavier than any prison shackle. Envoy Razek approached, his measured footsteps echoing across the polished stone. You do not understand the honor you have been given, he said, his voice almost soft, though his eyes gleamed with something sharp. To belong to the matriarch is to Marcus stood in the center of the chamber, surrounded by silence, so deep it pressed against his skin like a second weight. His body trembled from exhaustion, his blood still slick along his arms, but he forced himself to remain upright, unbowed. Across from him the matriarch loomed, vast and terrible, her crown of bone spines gleaming in the soft light, her very presence demanding submission. Around them, warriors and counselors held their breath, waiting for the human's final choice, kneel or die. Her voice rolled out like thunder contained in velvet. "You will stand as protector of my son. You will belong to me." The words echoed, the cadence final, the expectation absolute. Marcus lifted his chin, his throat tight, but his voice steady. "I can't belong to you. I won't belong to anyone. If I fight for Kale, I fight as myself, not as your property." His words carried across the chamber, drawing sharp inhales and low growls from the warriors gathered there. Defiance in the matriarch's hall was unthinkable. But Kale broke the tension, darting forward with a speed born of desperation. He grabbed Marcus's hand, his small frame trembling but his eyes burning with conviction. "He protect me," the boy said, his voice thin yet clear. "He protect all." The matriarch's gaze softened almost imperceptibly. Her lips curved, not in kindness, but in recognition of something rare. "You defied my warden. You bled for my blood. You survived trial by blade. Now you stand before me and refuse even the chains of honor." She leaned forward, her silhouette vast and terrible. "Tell me, human, if not chains, then what do you demand?" Marcus's breath came ragged, but his heart pounded with something hotter than fear. "Freedom. For my people. No more cages, no more slaves. If you want me to guard Kale, then humanity stands beside you as allies. Anything less, and you'll have my corpse, not my loyalty." The words fell like stones into still water, rippling through the hall. Counselors hissed, fists clenching. Even Razek, composed as always, allowed the faintest flicker of unease to cross his features. But Tovar, the stoic guard, shifted subtly, his eyes narrowing with a kind of respect usually reserved for warriors who had earned their scars. The matriarch's laughter filled the chamber, deep and resonant. It was not mocking, it was delight edged with danger. "You bargain with me as if you are my equal. A slave dares to reshape the fate of his kind with words alone." She rose to her full height, her veil shimmering like molten silver. "And yet no one has ever spoken to me thus and lived." Marcus met her gaze, without flinching. "Then maybe no one has ever shown you the truth. Power doesn't come from fear. It comes from those who choose to stand with you." For a long moment, silence reigned. Then the matriarch lifted a single hand. The guards immediately lowered their weapons. Her voice carried, steady and commanding. "So be it. The humans will not be slaves. They will remain under my dominion, but not in chains. You, Marcus Hale, will stand as guardian to my son, not as property, but as chosen." Gasps echoed around the chamber. The counselors exchanged glances of disbelief, the kind of stunned or reserved for witnessing history twist in a way none expected. Razek bowed deeply, though his eyes never left Marcus, calculating what this human might yet become. Tovar gave a single nod, acknowledging the impossible had been done. Kale squeezed Marcus's hand, his eyes alight with relief and joy. In that fragile grip Marcus felt the weight of every decision he had made since stepping between the boy and Varric's claws. He had never sought power, never cared for thrones or crowns. Yet here he was, reshaping an empire through nothing more than stubborn defiance and the refusal to let a child bleed alone. The matriarch's gaze lingered on him, her smile sharp as a blade. "Do not mistake this victory for conquest, human. You have won a place at my side, but the cost of failure will be greater than death. Protect my son, protect your kind, and perhaps your defiance will forge something new. But betray me, and you will beg for the prison you left behind." Marcus nodded once, his voice low but unwavering. "I'll protect him, but not because you command it, because it's right." The matriarch's laughter boomed again, shaking the walls. Then let the galaxy remember this day, the day a human stood before me and did not kneel. When the audience ended, Marcus was escorted to a balcony overlooking the alien capital. The city stretched beneath him, endless spires of bone and steel, the air alive with the hum of engines and the cries of creatures soaring overhead. His people, once bound in cages, would soon walk free within this world. Perhaps not as equals, not yet, but no longer as broken shadows. Tovar approached quietly, his massive frame blotting out the torchlight for a moment. "You carry a burden now heavier than any chain," he rumbled. "Guard it well." Marcus watched the horizon, the alien sun setting in molten gold. He thought of the prisoners in the dark cells, of Kale's trembling hand, of the matriarch's laughter ringing through the hall. He thought of Earth, scarred and battered, still fighting. His lips curved into something caught between a grimace and a smile. "I didn't fight for a throne," he whispered to himself. "I fought for a child. But if that fight shakes empires, so be it." Behind him, the city roared with voices both alien and familiar. Ahead of him, the future stretched vast and uncertain. And at the heart of it stood Marcus Hale, battered soldier, unwilling consort, and the man who had turned mercy into defiance. He knew the battles to come would be crueler still, but for the first time since his capture, he no longer felt like a prisoner. He felt like a beginning. "You said